And yeah, I think this is, a very important time to be having this discussion or these conversations. I have to apologize, I did not prepare a slide because I have just my schedule just very tight that I didn't get a chance to prepare a slide. So I want this to be more like a conversational section. But then just to highlight, the moderator was trying to introduce me, and I was trying to paint a picture like I was this one high level speaker. I'm just a fellow youth like you guys who believe at the very fundamental level the critical role young people have to play in driving the global sustainable development. And this fundamental conviction has been what has been driving my work, especially in the areas of trying to ensure that the voices of young people, the voices of children and young people is actively represented within UN decision-making processes. We started out trying to working with the UNFCCC through the Youth Constituency Yongo, and expanding that work to the broader UNMGCY, both the Chemical and Waste Cluster, the UNEP, and the different clusters, and I think the SDG7 youth constituencies as well. So young people have very critical role to play in the collective clamor to meet the UN SDG. I think I would like to the topic of this section is healthy people, healthy planet, and aligning goals for a resilient and sustainable future. I think I would like to start by just trying to build, just trying to establish what was the synergy or was the connection really between a healthy people and a healthy environment. When people talk about climate change or any of the triple planetary crises, like biodiversity loss, pollution, and any of them, they try to separate that with the human health consequences of that, which I think it's something that we need to start to broaden that conversation. Take climate change, for example. When you talk about climate change or biodiversity, you see how this directly interlinked to human health, especially just 2-3 years ago. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and if you want to trace, roll back to look at the beginning of the crisis, the COVID crisis, you discover that it's a zoonotic disease, which are viruses that can be transferred between animal. And if you look backwards to how those started, you find out that these are as a result of unhealthy interactions between the humans and then the maybe the host of this virus, and how that started, which also pose a lot of threats. And then you look at in low-income communities and how climate change is exacerbating threats, or is multiplying threats being faced by those communities. You look at the nexus between climate change and insecurity, the nexus between climate change and how it's exacerbating poverty, and how these, collectively have a tie to, how, to the degree of which those communities can have a very healthy life. One exciting project that I worked on during my undergraduate studies was to look at women in last mile communities and their dependence on biomass, firewood to meet their daily cooking needs. And this is mainstream in all parts of Nigeria. You look at the southeastern parts of Nigeria, people in last mile communities, in low income communities, families at the bottom of the income pyramid, and the southwest, in this north, in the north. So you find out that these communities still heavily depends on firewood and firewood cooking. And then when you look at the impact of this to their health, you look at figures from UN agencies, you look at how this is one of the major causes of indoor air pollution. I'm not talking about the effect of this on the environment. I'm talking about the effect of this on the health of the women and children living in those communities, which is catastrophic. I was in a section a while, and I was having this dialogue that if the number of deaths that is being recorded due to indoor air pollution as a result of air pollution, it's that we are seeing it in other parts of the world, like in a more developed part of the world. The table, it must have been declared an emergency, and a lot of efforts will have been channeled to try to mitigate this. But because these are probably coming from developing countries and and regions that have been historically neglected in or marginalized in conversation like this, we're not seeing it making a lot of headlines, and which is the challenge really for me and you, especially as not as young people, but also as young people from Africa, from young people from Nigeria, to recognize that this is to see this challenge firsthand, and to stand and try to imagine what meaningful action, what solutions could be to mitigate this, and how and what is our role in what roles we can play in trying to ensure that we are able to deliver on some of these goals. And then to think of this within the context of the UN Sustainable Development Goal. Personally, I think that the UN SDG provide a very comprehensive framework for addressing global challenges. We have 17 of them. This was initially agreed on in 2015 with the goal to meeting these goals by 2030. But when you do a stock take of what we've achieved, you see that we've come a very long way, but then we still have so far to go. And when I reflect on the progress that's been made, and the role young people has played, in driving these actions, and then also the role of both government and non-state actors, I think it's commendable. But then you look at at the number of how, as a global community, we've reduced poverty drastically. Within the last 50 years, we've reduced poverty more than we've the world have done in the last 200 years or so. So you see that these are very critical element and very critical framework that as young people we have to look at this and then adopt strategies to try to ensure that we meet them. But then we'll see that we also have the timeline we have to 2030, and what still needs to be done, the amount of work that still needs to be done to be able to meet this goal within the by 2030. And I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I think it also calls for a need for we to stand up. But the brilliant thing is that the decision makers, people who are at the decision making circles, the government, the political leaders of the world today, in 8 years time, in 2030, it will be me and you who are sitting here, will be at the door of those places. It would be that we will be very much sitting in some of those positions, and it means that that we should be, if we are able to meet the goals as clearly outlined within the UN SDGs, it means that it would be a win-win for young people, mostly for the youths of today. And that is one of the very major reasons that I think young people have such immense and critical role to play in this fight. And this role far outweighs any other thing you think you have, or any other assignment. I was speaking with some young people who just finished secondary school and about making decision on what they want to do in colleges here in the UK. And the discourse was around how do they choose what they want to study. And I was trying to make the fact that whatever personal goal you think you have, that is very brilliant, but the most fundamental goals that I think should drive whatever career endeavor that you want to pursue, and it will be the goal, would be the fundamental with a fundamental understanding that you have the sole responsibility of making the sustainable development goals rise on your shoulder, not just but even beyond 2030. This does not mean that I'm telling young people to try to pursue a career in any of the SDG related topics, but that young people are free to pursue a career in whatever areas they want to. They want to, they feel that, they feel very much confident, or they feel that they are passionate about, but that in doing so, that they should look at how those disciplines connect, because at the end, everything connects. If you want to pursue law, there are a lot of ways in which you can bring sustainable development between the legal discipline. If you're a writer, you want to pursue writing. If you are a journalist, there are multitudes of ways of which you can bring this discourse, bring this dialogue, and try to connect this point. I studied mechanical engineering during my undergraduate, and why, as during my undergraduate years, one of the key things, I was doing a lot of grassroots organizing around climate change, and I was seeing firsthand I had interest in low carbon technologies, but not the core engineering of the low carbon technologies. I recognize that why there are a lot of young people with engineering background who are going into who want to work on renewable energy, who want to work on a lot of these things. There is I wanted to focus on the the policy aspect of how do you translate these technologies, how do you deal with the question of technology transfer, because when you talk about tackling climate change, you have to deal with the issues that tackling climate change on a very fundamental level still comes down to the transition to low carbon technologies. You have to rethink the energy sector. It means that you have to start discarding our dependence on fossil fuel and moving to cleaner alternatives. But then you want a country like Nigeria to move to cleaner alternative, and yet they've not built national technological capabilities to do this. Why there are a lot of young people who are skilled in those areas, there is still the policy gap, that enable those countries to build national system of innovation that will enable this transition. Mostly these transitions, or the transitions, the regimes that have perpetrated the climate crisis are socio-technical regimes. So they become path dependence due to years of path dependence. These technologies become locked in. It means that transition, those sectors becomes hard to abate sectors. It becomes very critical to transition, and it's now something that you need to start looking at them within the concept of transition theories, which is more of a social science discipline. And you need people with engineering background who understand the engineering and the technical complexities of this, and also imagine them with the social science aspect of this, seeing this as having both a social component and a technical component, which makes it very, very difficult and interesting conversation as well. And then how do you transfer technologies between developing countries and developing countries? So these are some of the multitudes of ways where you're doing what you like, but looking inwards to find a way to to connect what you're doing, what you're passionate about, your current career trajectory, or your current discipline, towards contributing to the global sustainable development. And I think also one of that is also one of the important challenge that the Sustainable Development Network also have to look at, how to start promoting this dialogue, and that young people realize the responsibility that they have. If we fail to meet the global sustainable development, we will, it's, it's still the me and you that we have to answer to this. In 20, 30, 40 years now, from now, the people who are present in this call, the young people of today, will be the decision makers. There will be responsible if there will be, the people that, will be held accountable. It will be me and you that will be held accountable for, probably something that we didn't, we weren't part of. So it means that we have to recognize that this, so we, rise on our hand to try to, prosper this. So that was one of the very, reasons that I believe that young people, me and you, have this fundamental, the primary calling, this fundamental primary responsibility to try to progress this. I will now go ahead to look at also what are the two SDGs that closely, very closely tied to the topic of this section. One of them is the goal 3, which, talks about the good health and well-being. And then, goal 13, which is climate action. For when you look at goal 13, climate action, it's very cross-cutting because it cut across some of the other SDGs you talk about. And when you talk about climate action, what does climate action mean? It means that we need to transition to cleaner electricity. You're talking about addressing goal 7. It means that you need to talk about life on land. You need to talk about, biodiversity, which is life on land. You talk about also marine life. You're talking about life under water. You're talking about infrastructure and innovation. So you cut across all the major SDGs. And when you look at goal 3, which is also healthy health and well-being, it cuts across also looking at the question of hunger. How do you, because nutrition and health are also two inseparable topics. So you find out that one of the beauty of the SDGs is that why it provide a very comprehensive framework to addressing global challenges, you still find out that some of these goals are cross-cutting. So it means that you can set out to address one of these goals, and then at the end of the day, you find out that you're addressing 3, 4, 5, 7 of the SDG goals. And it digs up actually to the debates, or to debate that it means that you have it means that people across different backgrounds, across multidisciplinary backgrounds, can actually come together to have dialogue like this, and to start bringing brainstorming together what they're doing in their respective domain, and to see how that fit into the other works, young people coming together to cross-pollinate each other's idea and to co-create solutions for a healthy planet. I did some bit of work on the nexus between climate change and insecurity in the northeast part of Nigeria, and you look at how why this is not being thought of most often. You look at the northerners, the Fulanis, who are predominantly herders, are having to migrate southwards in search of green pastures to graze their cows. You look at how climate change and drought is exacerbating the northeast region of Nigeria, and how this is in turn forcing these herders to migrate southwards in search of green pastures. And then the southerners, who are predominantly farmers, now accuse them of grazing cattle on their farmland, and this is leading to communal crisis, and we're seeing that over the years how that is manifesting. So you find out that there are a lot of ways of which climate change exacerbates insecurity. You also look at part of the Northeast that are being, ravaged by insecurity, like like the Boko Haram crisis and also the rise in banditry. You still see that these are areas that are constantly prone to are these are high risk area where climate change is driving extreme desertifications, and these are some of the questions that we need to open this discourse up to, the nexus between climate change and insecurity, and how do you address that, which is, currently looks like a Hakorean tax facing both all the Nigerian presidents since I think since Good Luck. And so all successive presidents have to come in and have to face the challenge of insecurity, and that is something that also needs to be addressed. And these are one of the I think I don't know the right words to use, but one of the wicked aspect of climate change is that low income communities, people at the bottom of the income pyramid are people who are most, are the people who are at high risk of exposure to this effect. And then those are also people who are doing very little or nothing to contribute to the crisis. I was in a UN dialogue, and it was this pseudo narrative that population growth is one of the leading cause of environmental challenges, and I had to challenge that narrative. If you look at countries with the huge emissions, those are countries who have huge large economic or GDP, and countries who have huge populations and very little economic growth have very little or non-existent CO2 emissions. So you find out that it is not population growth, or it is not population. What the science is telling us, what the data is telling us, it's not population growth that is exacerbating the crisis. It's the clamor for unremitted economic, infinite economic growth in a finite planet. And that is one of the reasons why in recent recent years, we are seeing the concept of the growth. What does it mean? What does the growth mean within the economics conversations? Countries are looking how the growth, and also for developing countries to try to understand what growth means to them. So we do not necessarily, as a developing country, have to modern our life or our economic growth or whatever using the Western standard. We need to develop a standard within ourselves that work for us, that take into account the unique perspective, the unique cultural differences, of us as Africans, or of us as Nigerian, and try to develop, around that trajectory. And this also means that we can get to a point where because the way the current world economy is currently structured is carbon sensitive. This means that for Nigeria to grow from a sub say 500 or 600 billion dollars GDP to a $3 trillion GDP, it means that their emissions, we have to multiply by times 10 or times 20, which will be catastrophic to the current climate to reduce global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So it means that why we recognize the fundamental need for Nigeria to meet to achieve the SDGs, the 17 SDGs in Nigeria, which means we need to reduce poverty, we need to eliminate hunger, and we need good quality education, all these things. It means that for us to do that, we need to find a path And this is where the challenge, the one of the most fundamental challenge of sustainable development. We need to find a path that allows us to meet all these SDGs, without compromising one. So we need to eliminate hunger. We need to eliminate hunger. We need to eliminate poverty. So eliminating poverty means that Nigeria will have a GDP per capita of maybe times 10 what its GDP per capita is now, without exacerbating the climate crisis. And it is a challenge because if we try to grow our GDP with the current economic model, it means that we need a lot of productive activities to happen within the countries, within our national border. And for that to happen, if we did not transition the current socio-technical regime, whether the energy regime or the food or the whatever, all the sustainable regimes, all the regimes present that exacerbate the climate crisis, it means that our emissions, we have to skyrocket. It means that we are putting some of the other SDGs, we are, putting some of the other SDGs in, we are giving up on them. So it means that we need to find a balance. How do we deliver ambitiously, not slow progress? We need to quantum leap. How do we take that quantum job to meet these SDGs without compromising on one or two of the other SDGs? And to be very honest with you, that conversation is not happening anywhere within the leadership cycles or within the government cycles here in Nigeria. And we need to get that to start happening. It's happening within civil societies, it's happening within the academia, it's happening within people like me and you, young people who are reading some of these changes in the grassroots level, but it's not happening within the government cycle. And it's also one of the critical issues that we think we need to address too. We've seen a scenario where maybe a minister of environment wants to submit an NDC present to reduce CO2 emissions in the agricultural sector by 20% or 30%, in the transport sector by 20%, and submit that to the UN. And then the Minister of Transport does not even know what is included, that the Minister of Environment prays to reduce emissions by 30% in his sector, and the Minister of Agriculture does not have. So this synergy of trying to have this this cross-cutting and cross-disciplinary, cross-sectoral collaboration and cross-sectoral dialogue is something also that I think is very important. Why each individual or separate ministries are progressing, are setting out their goals and commitments. Like we established before, some of these are cross-cutting, recognizing that these challenges are cross-cutting. How do we bridge this gap between those two dialogues, those two different areas, is also something that is very crucial. And some of the and why I think when I started area, I said that this still remains the very fundamental, the biggest task that as young people today that we need to deliver on. Whatever happens, if we get it right, it will be us that will take the we will take the approach. If we fail, it will still we will still be at the receiving end. So it means that we have responsibility, unlike any generation, unlike any generation since God knows when. I think within the last 30, 40 years, there were a lot of dialogue around nuclear non-proliferation. But this dialogue have moved now towards focusing on the triple planetary crisis and climate change, which is, one of the very major challenge that poses a huge threat to global securities, because it does not respect any boundaries, and it does not respect it's no respecter of boundaries. It's global in nature, and the solutions around this is also very global. I've tried to talk a lot to establish the fact that this is why this responsibility lies on the shoulder of me and you, the young people. But now I want to move forward to talk about the opportunities that are there for young people to read this dialogue and to lead this change, and why this means, and why this offers a very profitable, if that is the word to use, a very profitable, a very profitable and noble cost for any person who decide to read this dialogue, to lead this change. If you look at you start from the from the agreement, the Copenhagen Agreement of developing countries pledging to put out $100 billion a year in climate finance for developing countries. What this does is that it opens a lot of private and public capital funding for anybody or any enterprise who are actively looking at building climate tech. It can be in smart agriculture, it can be in adaptive technologies, it can be in renewable energy. It means that there is, for young people who are, entrepreneur in nature, who wants to build solutions, to tackle one of these challenges. One of the beautiful things of entrepreneurship is it tries to fix the friction, on our path today. So if any young people wanted to contribute to these conversations, or to contribute to being part of this solution, to social enterprise, to entrepreneurship, there are a lot of funding, available to help young people start and run and to scale their initiatives. And this is made available because at this point in time, this is one of the most important discourse, in global debate. There are a lot of conference of parties that brings together multilateral stakeholders to progress this dialogue. But till today, the Climate Conference of Parties, which is COP, still remains one of the most talked about, one of the most heavily discussed, and which means there are a lot of in Egypt last year, world leaders agreed to step aside funding to address loss and damage, and this means that there is endless opportunities for young people who are building solutions between clean tech, between all these overarching areas to key into that, both public and private finance, and then also people who don't want to tread the traditional entrepreneurial route and wants to look at the other areas like policy making, advocacy, and also even people who are who have a background in academia. There are myriads of reasons why you should look inwards to try to see where what do you enjoy doing most? What are that particular topic that you want to spend the rest of your life working on? It doesn't have to be one thing, and you can always change, as you work, as you get started in the process, you try to find yourself more, and you can always pivot till you find out things that you think you want to do, and you can build a very fruitful career, doing that. And the good thing about that is that you're contributing to tackling global challenges, and you get that fulfillment firsthand that what you're doing is helping, is part of a greater cause and is helping deliver the future that we all want to live. I think I must have overstayed my my time, so I want to hand over to the moderator. And thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Kelo, for that amazing presentation. I'm really just more inspired to, to tow this path. Like, one of the key takeaways for me is that first, there are lots of opportunities, right? Yeah, like you said, there are lots of opportunities for young people who intend to tow this path towards salvaging the current climate crisis going on. Especially considering the fact that for people like us, or if you've realized, communities like you said, low-level communities, or communities in the lowest level of the pyramid, tend to suffer the brunt of this climate crisis. So the onus falls on us young people to change this narrative, to take our planet back in line with our thing. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Kelu. And at this point, I think we should move to the second part of this presentation, or this webinar rather. So now we'll ask questions. Like, there are certain questions I feel like I need to throw out there for the panelists, and even you as our guest speaker too, to also try to attempt to provide answers to. But before I do that, okay, I also need to point out that if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box. So when we finish the phase 2, we're now going to phase 3, where we'll address any questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box, while I also read out the questions I prepared for our guest speakers. Before I do that, I also need to introduce our panelists. So our first panelist for today is Ms. Janet Anosike. Ms. Janet Anosike is a graduate of plant science and biotechnology. She's passionate about acquiring and imparting knowledge. She's a lover of nature and the arts. She cares about the environment and finds this to be an endless source of inspiration for her writing. Her short story made the Engaging Borders Africa shortlist in 2021. When she's not working, she runs various small businesses, volunteers for humanitarian causes, and spends time catching up on new trends in technology. She's a member of the Yearly Network, Enugu. She's a member of the Yearly Network and also a member of the Enugu Literary Society, amongst others. We are deeply glad to have her in our midst and look forward to tapping from our wealth of experience. So, Ms. Janet, if you are here, just say hello before we introduce our second panelist.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. It's quite a pleasure.
Thank you, Janet. We're glad to have you here. Our second panelist for today is another person but Mr. John Bosco Okwene. So John Bosco Okwene is a computer engineering graduate from Enugu State University. In practice, he's a front-end developer with Stevenson Group. On the other hand, he's a dedicated environmental enthusiast and an advocate for sustainable development goals in Nigeria. We are deeply honored to have him here to share his expertise and insights on how we can collectively achieve a more sustainable environment. You're welcome to the call, Mr. John Bosco.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that, John Bosco. So, so let me just read out some questions I have. Okay, I've already seen someone sent in a question. I'll be in phase 2. Let me read out some questions, right? So the first question I have is, how can climate action help protect vulnerable communities and improve their health? Anyone can address this. Mr. John Bosco, do you want to take this?
Okay, good afternoon. hope I'm audible.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Of course, climate action can help vulnerable communities in that the necessary measures are put in place. For instance, we know what the effects of climate change have on our environment, such as flooding, it affects both plants and lives, human lives. So of course, if necessary measures are put in place, for instance, if we have a more clean energy source, if our waters are okay, it helps to ensure that the vulnerable communities have a safer life, and of course their health is protected. That's one. Then of course, with climate actions, we have a more stable environment, like weather conditions for agricultural produce. That is, if we have enough food and plants produce in this season optimally, finally there won't be shortage of food, and of course there won't be scarcity of food. So it helps in a great way to curtail or caution the effects of global warming on vulnerable communities. If the general my co-panelists thank you.
Thank you, Mr. John Bosco, for that. In subsequent answers you might want to give, please. Someone complained that they couldn't, or they can't hear you, or they couldn't hear you well. So perhaps in the next question you might want to answer, you try to be more audible or speak directly into the microphone.
Okay, that's okay.
So, Ms. Janet, did you want to say something?
Yes, yes, if I may add to that, and only to the fact that they couldn't hear him properly. Can you hear me properly?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, just like the first speaker mentioned, the communities which bear the brunt of this effects of climate change are actually the ones who contribute the very least to it, with resultant colossal damage to the disadvantaged members of these communities. We are talking about minorities like women and children. So going back to your question, what effects of climate action on improving the health of these communities, right?
Yes.
So if we can offer safe water, encourage and support sustainable agricultural practices, seeing as these communities are actually low income earning communities, and also encourage other maybe alternatives such as renewable energy. I think this will go a long way in reducing the emission of greenhouse gases, and at the end, promoting the health and general well-being of the members of these vulnerable communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Janet, for your contribution as well. So, I don't know for the guests, but I just want to put it out there because I feel maybe some people that belong to the some of our guests might not really know about this or might not be well aware. So let's just take something very basic. So how exactly is climate change different from global warming? Or what's the point of disparity between climate change and global warming? We can't hear you. The mic is muted, Ms. Janet.
Okay. I think we should actually bring it down to the very basics now. We all know climate refers to the weather conditions of a particular place over a period of time. And now climate change also refers to the changes of climate in the atmospheric pattern over a period of time. Now, what is global warming? Global warming is actually the increase in the atmospheric temperature of the Earth. So global warming is actually as a result of human activities, such as the burning of fossil fuels. When I talk about fossil fuel, I'm talking about things such as burning of firewood or coal, leading to the resultant emission of greenhouse gases. So when we talk about greenhouse gases, we're talking about gases like carbon dioxide, that is CO2, CFCs, which are chlorofluorocarbons. So when these gases are emitted into the atmosphere, they are trapped. They trap heat into the atmosphere, resulting in the increase in our atmospheric temperature, which is generally what we call global warming. So the resultant effect being changes in the patterns, atmospheric patterns such as weather, rainfall. We have extreme cases of rainfall or drought. Like present, we all know that the pattern of rainfall has actually changed. So these are resultant effects of global warming and climate change. So these two terms are actually used interchangeably, but they are not usually the same. I think, yeah, global warming is actually as a consequence of climate change.
Okay, thank you very much.
If I may add, can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Am I audible? Okay. So, Ms. Janet, of course, did justice to that. If I may add, climate change is like looking at a whole picture of like everything in totality about climate change and whatever. So then global warming is just like a part, one part of it. Just like we know we have floods and melting of ice and other things. So global warming is just one part of it. While climate change is more like a general view of the whole picture. And that's what I want to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Numbers. Okay, let me ask another question. I also thought is important to be addressed. So how exactly does climate change impact food security, and what can we do, we as humans, what can we do to address this issue?
Should I go or is Janet there? Okay. I think I'm clear enough, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Now, climate change, like we know, affects virtually everything, ranging from sunshine to rainfall. We know from our basic studies that, of course, plants need sunlight, photosynthesis to grow, another thing. If all these factors, and then if plants don't get enough of the energy they require, and as well as enough water which they require, it affects their productivity. So if their productivity is affected because they don't get enough sunlight or enough rain because of climate change, it in turn affects there'll be crop shortage because the plants won't be able to, because the season, you can observe that looking at the environment today, the rainfall we used to know is not as it was. And sun is always, like, we all know that everything has changed. So it affects agricultural production. Of course, just like Janet pointed out when she was speaking, now there could be support for small-scale farmers, that is to promote agroecology, to help them. mitigate the effects of this climate change, as well as, of course, developing climate resilience crops, which of course are adapted to the present climate condition. It will help to promote and enhance food security. I think that will help in cushioning the effects of climate change on agriculture and its produce. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. Any other comments? Any other answer to that? The speakers. Yeah. So I'll ask 2 more questions before we go on to address the questions from the audience, if any. So let's take this one. Do you really think climate change is reversible? Like, let me just put it that way. Do you think climate change is reversible? Can it be turned around? Can all these effects we see, do you think we can change? You know, like Ms. Janet said, when she was defining climate change, she said like the change in the weather condition, long-term change in the weather condition. So imagine when, of course, we all know that these days it gets so much hotter in Nigeria. So like, do you think we can reverse this to like when it was normal, when weather was normal, when weather was not so hot as it used to be now, as it is now?
When we say reversible, I wouldn't really say completely though, but the truth is that the effects of climate change are already here with us. Then another truth is that if we do not take action now, we'll be left with more drastic effects of climate change. So yes, we can begin with small actionable steps to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases, which go a long way in reducing the global warming. From statistics, the atmospheric temperature is at a high, over 50% more than what it was in 1990. So that means if we just say, okay, the effects are already here with us and we do not take action, then the effect keeps on spiraling down. So yes, is climate change reversibly? Maybe not completely though, but that also shouldn't stop us from taking actions to mitigate it. And also, apart from taking actions to mitigate climate change, there's also climate adaptability, which means ways of making the earth livable for us while we are battling the effects of climate change. So yes, we can mitigate and we can also take steps to adapt. When I'm talking about adapt, I mean maybe something like introducing drought-resistant crops to farmers, putting warning systems in place in areas of where in disaster-prone areas. So these are actually things that can help. So it might not be completely reversible, but with climate mitigation and climate change mitigation and climate adaptability hand in hand, I think we're actually on the way forward to reducing the effects of climate change.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Janet. Any other comments from the panelists or the speaker?
I think we are good. She dealt with the question very well.
Okay. So let's take the last one. And Mr. Kello already talked on this, but in case I just want to hear this different perspective, right? Different perspectives to this. So this final question goes like this. So yeah, Mr. Kello has said stuff about advocacy, different steps you can take to actually mitigate this climate change. So in your own views, what other ways can we individuals contribute to addressing climate change?
As an individual or as, I don't understand, you mean the government or as an individual?
As an individual, yeah.
Well, since we already know the things that lead to climate change, and I think we should also all look at engaging in sustainable practices. The very basic things we can do in our environment, like switching to cleaner energy sources, reducing our carbon footprint as much as possible. Whichever business you run, engaging in sustainable practices in whatever sector at all you might find yourself in. And as young people, influencing policies, that goes hand in hand with advocacy. And as well, relearning, unlearning, and relearning things about climate action and climate change. And also, of course, coming up with innovative innovations, generally speaking. As young people, I think the onus lies on us to come up with innovations to mitigate the effects of climate change, talking about offering green energy solutions. So that's basically what an individual can do to mitigate the effects of climate change.
Of course, and then if I may add to, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, just as well as reducing emission and adapting to cleaner energy, I think the one thing also is having a paradigm shift, like our mindset in sincerity, accepting that we need to do this for sustainability. That is considering the future generation. If every individual will, in their own house, in their own domain, of course, live sustainably, I think it will help us promote that. By, of course, we have can practice sustainable consumption. Just like so many people, they get what they don't actually need, they eat more than they need, and then we have waste of food and other things. If then, of course, eco-friendly transportation and other things, it will help individually to mitigate the effects of climate change. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Thank you, Ms. Janet. So I've exhausted the questions I prepared for the panelists. So I think it's fair to say it's time to go on to phase 3. So are there any questions you might have? Questions from the audience, please. Any questions? Because I'm not seeing any right now. I saw one earlier, but I think it was a personal message to me. So, any question from the audience? Okay, so it seems everyone is
may I ask?
Okay, sure.
Okay, when Mr. Kim was speaking in his introductory statement, I don't know, I just seek some clarity. He pointed out that, if I'm right, that the poverty rates we used to have 200 years ago have been drastically reduced as at now. I don't know if that applies to Nigeria or he's exempting Nigeria. So I want to know his basis for those, or if he has any pointers or index to support that, because walking our streets, you find out that people are still like in extreme poverty. So I don't know if you can shed more light on that. Thank you.
Nakelu, are you there?
Yeah. So if I can I get the question? I didn't get the starting of the question, but I know you said something about So
Yes, can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, my question is, what are the basis or what figures do you have to support? You say that poverty rates 200 years ago has been reduced as at today. I don't know if it's applicable to Nigeria or you're talking about other nations.
So yeah, I'm talking about the world, like globally. So that what I said really was that within the last 50 years or so, we've had a lot more people move out of globally, move out of poverty than the last 200 years. And I think that is also the same thing in Nigeria. So say go back to Nigeria 200 years ago. If you can just imagine 200 years ago is probably the pre-colonial era. Yeah, you look at a lot of metrics. What are the, if you look at the metrics of you used to measure poverty, and then you compare it to some of the, in fact, some of the things a lot of that we have access to usually will be considered, extreme luxury, extreme luxury, luxurious, 200 years ago or 150 years ago. So what I'm trying to say, or what I said, is globally, a number of people, globally, that have been lifted out of poverty, globally, it's more than what that have been lifted out of poverty in the past 200 years. This is also true for, you look at also the Asian tigers. You look at countries in the Asian tigers and how, they've done a lot of amazing transformation in economic and a lot of transformation. So generally, the world has been, yeah, I'm not talking specifically about Nigeria, but if you also look at it in Nigeria, you see that also firsthand. Yeah, a lot of, in different ways.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Kelu. Are you satisfied, Mr. John Bosco?
Okay, I think I get this point. Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if
There's a question.
Hello?
Sorry, sorry. Let me read out this question. Sorry. So someone was asking, are there any benefits or advantages of global warming? Who would like to take this?
So I can probably take because the question, I think it's I don't think the framing is a bit complete. When you say, are there benefits to global warming, advantages of global warming, if you're talking about it in the context of the present day, I would say no. But if you look at the history of the world or the history of the earth, some 4,000 years ago, the earth, it's very, very, some years ago, you find out that the earth is almost very cold, and some areas is almost uninhabitable due to the amount of cold. This must usually what you call the ice age. So it's still the world warming up, and the world has been always adjusting to these changes. So there's what you call the feedback systems, and normally how the earth system reacts to some of the challenges. But when you look at the present day, is there benefits to global warming? We, even if I'm not a I'm not a scientist that is specifically studying those aspects, but even if there is the consequences or the disadvantages far outweighs whatever benefits there are. If you look at maybe countries like Russia or Canada, they are very areas that are extremely cold. And if maybe if global temperature rises to an average of say 4-6 degrees Celsius, it means that those areas might start having more temperate more temperature, but then it's just a very tiny fraction of the world populations, and then those people living in those areas are also very adapted to it. So but it means that also parts of the world must have been, almost a large proportion of the world population will be inhabitable. So I don't think, generally speaking, that you can say there is, within the context of the present day, there is any benefits to global warming.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. So, does any other person, any other panelists have something to say? And also, any other question from the audience? Because we should be rounding up any moment from now. So if you have your question, drop it quickly. We can go through it. I have something to say.
Okay. What was I trying to say? Okay. He was talking about Nigeria advancing in like its economy and GDP, and its consequence that if we are to grow from our present GDP to higher GDP, that will be, of course, contributing more to the what is it called, climate change effects. But I think I can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay. I think I have just a slight perspective now. If we are, I would say at this point that Nigeria is contributing very little amounts to the climate change effects. Now, it's a good thing if we are to become a developed nation industrially. Why? Because I strongly feel development, or what we have in the developed world today, they did it, of course, without having climate change in mind, and that what they are doing might affect the environment. Now, but if we are to become a developed nation now, I think we'll be lucky because we'll be putting certain yardsticks or things into consideration while developing. For instance, adapting to cleaner energies. We know that companies or whatever, they run one with energy, transportation, and raw material. If we are now reducing fossil emission by adapting to maybe wind or solar in terms of industrializing, we can actually become a developed nation while as well contributing very little to climate change and global warming, because we're already aware of the effects of the methods used in the past, and then we are taking precautions while doing that. So I think it's a win for Nigeria if we are to go industrialized now. I think that's my take. I don't know if how you see. I'm just reasoning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree with you. So the argument around industrialization is usually, very competitive. Currently, Nigeria, this is not a pessimist idea, but for Nigeria to become industrialized, they must build capabilities within the national boundaries. It is impossible. So for a country to become more productive, it means that you need to use productivity, in economics is measured by you have to use lesser input to get more a higher output. And for Nigeria to be industrialized, they have the population, to do that. They don't have the political will, but they need to build national, technological capabilities, develop national system of innovation. Like, we cannot become industrialized by foreign companies coming to Nigeria to build industries for us. What will happen is that we'll turn Nigeria to a state where we have a lot of companies come to build factories that, a lot of things. But for Nigeria to develop, they need to build, I think strong institutions was one of the things. They need to build capabilities within and not have to depend on a lot of foreign. So if you take out the newly rolled Dangote refineries, you look at the top executives, you find out that most of the top executives are Indians, Japanese. You see that. I think the director, I don't know, the director is, or the general manager, or the general, this thing is an Indian. You find out that there's a lot lacking within. Nigeria don't have strong institutions. They need to build strong institutions, and that is one of the reasons why if you go through government managed establishment, it's failing. It's struggling to survive. Why is this happening? But people privately managed in the systems are being, are thriving. Some of them are trying to. If you look at except our banks, but look at MTN, other big establishments in Nigeria, most of them have foreigners who are heading those things. Why is that? Can we start to answer the question of why that? So Nigeria needs to build capabilities. And this is not something that you wake up, you build. You need to be, you need to start to develop those capabilities, to build that capabilities. If you look at how Korea, if you studied how Korea, Singapore emerged, you see that. You look at India, you find out that India start emerging from when from the ITT, their Indian Institution of Technologies, they started to develop themselves inward, they're building those capabilities. And it's very important that Nigeria need to do that. And then another problem that Nigeria will have to have is that some of the best people coming out of Nigeria are leaving Nigeria. Myself, why we graduated from doing my undergraduate, some of the most creative, most brilliant students, that in my set, 80% of them, have left Nigeria or about to leave Nigeria. So it means that Nigeria is currently losing the core talent, some of the most talented people who can, be able to reach some of those changes. And if we don't try to, start getting it right within a lot of contexts, it will be very difficult for Nigeria to you can have one industry here and there, but that is really not what it means to become a developed nation. Because becoming a developed nation, there are different factors that come into play. I was looking at a report someone wrote showing the critical vulnerabilities that currently exist within the Nigerian banking sector. We look at a lot of how you have BVN, you have NNI. For election, you still need to do what is it called, voters ID card. You have 3 separate systems that still need your biometric distance, but yet you can't effectively manage that. So there are a lot of things, there are a lot of fragments of which Nigeria need to meet for them to. So for us to start building power plants up and down, if government build power plants, that you have energy, 100% energy access in Nigeria, and it's managed by government, what will happen is that 30, 40 years down the line, 80% of those power plants will not function. If you look at the power plants currently happening in Nigeria, that we have in Nigeria. You have an installed capacity, say, wind power plant in Lagos, that you have an installed capacity of maybe 1,200 megawatts. That is the normal this thing the plant is meant to generate. But if you go there, it's generating 300 megawatts. What is those things? Those are a lot of inefficiencies in the system. So Nigeria, it's unfortunately, Nigeria cannot industrialize without first building those capabilities. And it's very sad that we don't even, we're not even having that conversation yet within the political or the governance spectrum.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kilo. That was a very interesting discourse, honestly. And it also, in as much as it was interesting, it's also painful to realize that, the brain drain situation is even getting worse, because every single person seems to be looking for a way to give every single person that is like, so every single person that has any little bit of creativity in them just seems to want to leave this place and go out there and to make a better life for themselves. Well, it is what it is. Just have to keep trying our own best. So thank you all very much for coming to this session. I also need to remind us of our next. Like I said when I started this this webinar, I said we have 2 episodes in this series. So this today marks the first episode. So the next episode will be a week today, the same time, 3 p.m. West African time. So what will be, like we said when we highlighted the theme for this webinar, we said there are 2 goals we're interested in. So today we dwell more on climate action. In the next webinar series, we'll be interested on next next episode of the series, we'll be interested in talking about the health aspects. We try to enlighten ourselves on certain health practices that we might need to adopt to be able to live a better life. And at the end, we try to also connect that with the environment and see how we can have both a healthy life and a healthy planet. So thank you all very much for coming to this, for attending this session. Thank you to our guest speaker, Mr. Kelo. Thank you very much for your support and your presence here. Thank you to our panelists, Ms. Janet and Mr. John Bosco. Thank you for your answers. You guys are amazing. So,
thank you very much, Mr. Yeah. I also join voices to really appreciate our guest speaker. Like, he did an amazing job. Like, it was very enlightening and heartwarming to listen to him. Thank you very much. I hope to have him some other time, if possible. Thank you.
We have to end this right now. We arranged for 1 hour 30 minutes, and it's exactly 1 hour 30 minutes. So thank you all for coming here. We're glad we're able to round up within the stipulated time, and we hope to have you all next week's episode of this series. Thank you and goodbye to everyone.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.